This following message by Drew McHolm is brought to you by Aim for the Highest.
I don't know who left this little cross here. Have you ever noticed it up here? Was it one of you guys? Well, somebody left this cross here. I guess somebody visiting the church, and it's exactly the same color as the lectern. It's really cool. And I've been trying to fit it so it fits in some of the design that you can't see it. So, whoever, if you're watching my video, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's been here for quite a few weeks. So I want to share a message with you this morning that's, I hope will be an encouragement to the mothers and wives in here today. I wish that it could be like a one-size-fits-all message, but it can't be, because some people clearly identify with this more than others for various reasons. I'm very well aware that Mother's Day is a day that we spend celebrating and honoring our moms, but I'm also very aware that it's also a difficult day for folks. Some people listening to this message may be childless, unable to conceive. Others may have lost their mom or their child. And today, for many people, the magnitude of that loss is magnified on Mother's Days. There are moms who are raising their kids on their own because father is absent from their life for many different reasons. And there are other moms whose kids have become wayward. They're in rebellion, doing drugs, whatever else. And so Mother's Day is not monolithic. It's not just one thing. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And some people rejoice in it. They look forward to being taken out to, Dave's restaurant or, Montage or somewhere, wherever your pocketbook can afford, or whatever. And it's a great day. But for some, it's a tough day. It can be a difficult day. On top of all these pressures a mom may be under, they are constantly bombarded with a set of ideals. We live in a very idealistic and narcissistic society. You ever notice that? It's getting worse and worse. We become idealistic, very narcissistic. It's all about me, how I look, how I feel, and all that kind of stuff. And this has affected moms in many, many different ways. Idealism dictates to us things like this, what we should look like, what we should wear, what we should drive, the kind of car we have, the kind of home we should live in, how we should raise our kids. And these are all expectations that people have of us that sometimes can be very difficult to process. So where did all those expectations come from? Well, some of them come from family, from husbands, from parents, from in-laws, from siblings, and sometimes even the kids themselves. Sometimes they come from peers, other mothers who have been there before, especially when you're a new mom. They want to come along and tell you how they did it, and that's the way that you probably should do it too. And sometimes that can be a real pressure cooker for new moms especially. The media, let's face it, there are how to do it books and videos and online stuff and TV programs. I can't believe the number of renovation programs that are on the TV. Jess and I love watching those things. But at the same time, it's like ad nauseum. Everybody's telling you how to do your home. And we watch that, and Jesse will go, well, we could do that for our house in Texas, and it'll only cost us $5,000, and you can do it in a week. Well, in reality, because all these programs are staged. They're all staged. They're all staged. And so it's like that $5,000 it takes a week is actually $50,000 and it's never ending. If I was involved, I am not Chip Gaines. I just don't see it that way at all. God bless them. So media can do that, and then moms can put that expectation on themselves. Just pressure themselves into thinking, I ought to be this way, I ought to look that way, the kid ought to be like that. And here's the problem: not only is the expectation on the mom, it's on the kid or kids they're raising, and you got to have this ideal child, right? And what is the ideal child these days? Well, got to be good looking, got to be well mannered, got to be neat and clean, got to have an IQ probably above 140 at least. Got to be excelling in academics and sports because you got to get that scholarship, and got to be talented. You got to be a musician, artist in some way, shape, or form. Anything else, in some people's mind, would be a failure. Not reaching that level. So in an idealistic world, everything has got to be perfect. Nothing goes wrong. Everyone gets what he or she wished for in the end. And everything ends with and they all lived happily ever after. That, funnily enough, is the tagline in Fixer Upper after Chip Gaines has rebuilt their home. He says that to the couple that are all giddy about their new house and it's been redone and it's their dream home, and he says, well, you know, we wish you just live happily ever after in this place. In the real world, we deal with problems all the time. Broken dreams are often the norm. Some things never, ever get fixed. Somebody once wrote the following, and we're going to share this with you, and I thought it was kind of cute, about the picture society paints of the ideal mom versus what the real mom actually looks like. And I've kind of enhanced it a little bit. I kind of fixed it up, did a fixer-upper on this thing. This is the expectation. Her body. The ideal mom will have the perfect body after having 4 or 5 kids. The real mom knows that she will never ever see a size 4 or 6 again, except maybe in a pair of shoes. What about her time? The ideal mom will have all the time in the world to achieve all of her goals. The real mom will be scrambling to get the house from looking like a war zone before her husband gets home from work. And she might have 30 minutes to do that because she's working too. What about her husband? Now, during the first service, I made this comment, and there was some snickering from somebody in the front row. And it's not Tina. The ideal mom will be married to a loving, attentive guy who makes her laugh all the time, who will be a cross between Brad Pitt, Albert Einstein, and Chip Gaines. The real mom is married to her own husband. Her children. The ideal mom will expect to attend her son or daughter's graduation as he or she graduates summa cum laude. The real mom may have to visit that son or daughter in prison or in rehab. What about job or career? The ideal mom can balance the job of being a mother while holding down a C-suite corporate level executive job somewhere downtown. The real mom may have barely finished high school, is working on her GED while working for minimum wage at a convenience store in town. That's the real world. Folks, what you see in TV is not real. What you see in Hollywood is not real. That's not the real world. The real world is where we live here in Nashua, Iowa. Idealistic moms and families only exist in fairy tales, poems, or Hallmark movies. That's all. We don't live there. And the pressure that's put on moms especially, I think, is immense. I know I counsel quite a bit, and everywhere I've been, and I come across ladies who are under that kind of pressure, and who are either creaking or cracking under that pressure of expectations that's laid on them. This is how you ought to be, whether it comes from their husband, whether it comes from their family, whether it comes from the media, it doesn't matter. These unrealistic expectations that sometimes lead to undue pressure, sometimes lead to guilt, sometimes leads to condemnation and even bondage. So here's the thing, how does the Bible help moms deal with this whole issue of idealism in our society? What's expected? Well, there's a lot of great examples in the Bible. I can name a few. Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was submissive to God right from the get-go. When the angel appeared, do it unto me as according to your will. I mean, can you think of a more strange situation? Here's a virgin teenager in Israel who discovers she's pregnant, not by the one she's betrothed to, but by the Holy Spirit. How do you explain that to the rest of the gals at the well when you go to get some water? How does that work? How do you explain that? But yet she was submitted to the will of God right to the end. The wedding of Cana in Galilee, she says to all these people, whatever he says to you, talk about Jesus, do it. Just do it. And she's at the cross. Can you imagine for a moment being there when your son's nailed to a tree? Can you imagine that? And yet she's faithful. She didn't quit and run like the rest. She was there. Hannah, Old Testament example of prayer and faith, prayed before she had a baby. She was barren. She prayed, and the Lord answered her prayer. And then she prayed for her son Samuel, became one of the greatest prophets in Israel's history. Deborah, an example of spiritual leadership. Dorcas, a woman who displayed deeds of kindness. You find her in the New Testament. Eunice was Timothy's grandmother. Lois was his mother, and the Bible says that the things that Timothy got of the faith, the teaching of the Word of God, he got from his mom, Lois, who passed it down, who got it from her mother, Eunice. And so here's 3 generations of people in the Word of God. And then Lydia, you find her in the New Testament as well, who was devoted in worship. You see, for a Christian mom, the goal is not to be idealistic, to conform to what society throws your way, or who anybody else tells you what a family should look like, what a mom should look like, or your kids should look like. But the goal is to aspire to be the kind of wife and the kind of mother that God expects you to be, to follow that. Probably the clearest example of this whole thing is in the famous passage in Proverbs 31. Fascinating book, the book of Proverbs. 29 of the chapters were written by King Solomon. Chapter 30 and 31 probably were, but there's dispute theologically about that. Chapter 31 was written by a guy attributed to someone called King Lemuel. And this is what it says in the first verse of that. The sayings of King Lemuel, an inspired utterance his mother taught him. So what he is passing on about this amazing woman he talks about in the 31st chapter of Proverbs, he got from his mom. Now, if it was Solomon, and many people think it was another name for Solomon, then he got it from Bathsheba, because that was his mom, David's wife. In any case, he's passing down through the generations the principle his mom taught him about what God's ideal of a wife and mother, how they should look. Now, here's another interesting thing about Proverbs 31. That you may or may not know. You all know what an acrostic is, right? We take a letter of a word to spell out a theme or a sentence. For instance, the well-known one is grace, Grace. God's riches at Christ's expense. It's a teaching tool. It's a tool to enable you to memorize or to learn something. And a lot of preachers use that, from time to time. Proverbs 31, the whole chapter is an acrostic. The whole chapter, written in Hebrew, all 22 letters, from Aleph, Beth, Gimel, right through the whole thing, is written as an acrostic to display and to teach about this woman that is praiseworthy. And it's just a remarkable way in Hebrew literature it was written so that people would get it. And so basically what Lemuel or Solomon or whoever he was trying to do is to say, I want you to get this. I want to make this so easy for you to understand what this woman of God is like, so you don't miss it. So if you're looking for God's view of the ideal wife or mother, Proverbs 31 is a great place to start. So in verses 11 and 12, she's described as being someone who can be trusted by her husband. So if you've ever been to a wedding here at the Little Brown Church, so some of you have, here's what I say when you get to the ring thing, exchanging rings. And so I'll hold up a ring and I'll say what they normally do, pastors and priests and rabbis. This ring is circular and speaks to the never-ending, there's no end to it, speaks to the never-ending nature of love and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. I'll do that. And then I'll say rings are normally made with precious metals and stones. It speaks to the expensive nature of love, because love costs you all that you have and all that you are. Absolutely true. Then I'll say this. I said, I've been in this business for 40 years, on and off, mostly on. But I've also had my own businesses, been a chief operating officer in a company, corporation, been a VP and all that. So I know about business relationships, and I know about marriage relationships, and just relationships in general. And this is what I say to them. You're here today to make the biggest vow, the biggest promise that you can ever make in your life, to live together for the rest of your life. However, we make little promises all the time. We make vows to each other all the time. Sometimes we think they're insignificant, but they're really not. And then I'll bring it back to the issue that he mentions here, trust. And I'll say to them this: if you do not have trust in your relationship, you've got nothing. You get nothing. If you don't trust the person you're in business with, you don't trust the person you're living with because it's your spouse, you ain't got a thing. But the good news about trust is trust is easy to build. You know how you build trust? Simple. You make promises, you keep them. You make promises and you keep them. So I'll encourage them, when you make a promise, make sure you keep it. And sometimes you use, silly examples like, if he tells you he's going to help you wash the dishes from time to time, make sure you do it. Because she'll remember it. Because women, when they get angry, don't get hysterical, they get historical. A woman's memory is an amazing thing. Things that guys we forgot about, didn't even know it happened, totally out of our mind, all of a sudden. You remember what you did in 1975? I can't even remember last week, never mind 1975. But here's the thing, trust is so important. So what is being taught here is that the best thing you can give is trust, so that your husband, your children trust you. Then in verses 13 and 15, she's described as being a woman who works hard, looking after her husband and kids. In verse 16, she's described as being a good manager of her household. She had an eye for a bargain, that's what it mentions in here. And verses 26 and 27, she's described as being a woman who is careful in what she says and what she does. And that's important too. Then in verses 29 through 31, we see the response of that husband who's so blessed to have this wife. And this is how he responds to this wife and mother. Hear what he says. Her husband arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. And this is what he says. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. You're better than them all, in my opinion. Charm is deceptive. Now listen carefully to this. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Now you look at what's on the TV these days and what's coming across the airwaves, and it's all about beautifying this. Both men and women. You got to get Botox, you got to get injected, you got to get lifted, you got to whatever you get, all that kind of stuff. Now I'm not against all that, I've got a wife who's in the beauty industry, so I understand quite a bit about that. But remember what Samuel said about David. God doesn't look on the outward appearance. God looks in the heart. And that's where it begins. Now, I'm happy I've got a really good-looking wife, but I like what's inside more than what's outside. Thank you, Tom. These are godly and biblical goals for any Christian woman. For some women, Proverbs 31 is an ideal that they're working towards. For others, it's like a mountain that I'm never going to be able to climb that. It's just too much. I want you to read it when you go home, Proverbs 31, and I mean men as well. You guys got to read it too, not just the ladies. Someone once said the ideal woman was described almost 3,000 years ago in Proverbs 31, and she's still intimidating her sisters to this day. And I know some people that go, I could never be like that. Guys, listen, we're all a work in progress. Doesn't matter what it is. We haven't got there yet. We're pressing through, pressing on. So just in case you ladies are thinking, man, he's really hitting us hard with expectations of how we should be and how we should look and all that kind of stuff, just wait till Father's Day. You guys think you get off scot-free. Think again. Let me be real honest about this. One of the greatest problems in this nation is the lack of fatherhood. You wonder why so many kids are in jail? I know we all make personal choices. But when you get absentee fathers, and sometimes what I mean by absentee fathers is not a father who's out of the household. There are some guys that are home every night who are still absentee dads because they're not involved. Some dads have died, some divorced, some just walked off. Some walked off when the girl got pregnant, never seen again. Some are just throwing child support at the issue. Well, let me tell you, there's nothing worse than a family with an absentee father, and that's part of the big problem that we have in our nation right now. Women know what God's ideal is for them, but at the same time, they're realistic about where they are in the process. Now, let me finish this by saying a couple of things. The best thing that a woman can receive this Mother's Day is not a nice card or a bouquet of flowers or a little carnation we're going to give you at the end of this whole thing, but knowing that grace is available. Grace is available to navigate the challenges of motherhood, and that you're not your own. Everyone's working on it. No one's got there. I've met a single woman yet that came up and said, I think I've nailed the whole Proverbs 31. I'm that gal, you know. Well, if you're that gal, then probably need to deal with your problem of humility, you know, at the same time. Everyone's still working on it. And she also needs to know that the Lord knows exactly where she is, where you are, what you're dealing with on a daily basis as a wife and a mother. And you're saying, you mean Jesus understands that? Yeah, of course he does. I didn't know that. Well, I lived for 33 years with us and had a mom who was with him seemingly pretty much all the time. So he knew. Can you imagine the pressures that Mary was under being Jesus' mom? So Jesus knows. Now, he's not here, he's in heaven, but he still knows. Excuse me, and he still extends a lifeline to every mother here. He says this, for we do not, Book of Hebrews 4:15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. In light of that, he says, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and grace to help in time of need. God's mercy, God's grace is limitless. Ours is not. Sometimes you run out of grace for the kids. Sometimes you almost run out of mercy for the kids as well. But God's mercy and God's grace is limitless. All we need to do is ask. I need your grace to get me through the day. I need your strength to get me through this day. All hell seems to be breaking loose in the household. I don't have your help. It's not going to improve, so I need your help. I need your grace at this time. And lastly, she needs to know that her husband has her back. Now, after God, he's her number one cheerleader and loves her just the way that she is. Just as she loves you guys, just the way that you are.
For more information, visit us online at aimforthehighest.org.